I am so excited to welcome you not only to Jacksonville, but to the launching of the podcast called The Covenant, more specifically, the Sister Covenant. And yes, I did say sister. What is the covenant, the Sister Covenant? It is a circle of friends, my friends for 20, 30, 40 plus years, your friends, all of our friends, coming together in a safe space at a time such as this. We as women of color, we are counted on to nurture our families, our children, our significant others, our spouses, our community, our corporate boardrooms, and everything in between. But who fills our cup? I think about flying, and when we get ready to take off, what is said to us first? Put your oxygen mask on first before you can assist others. And that exactly is what the Sister Covenant is all about. A safe space to encourage, to listen, to cry a little, laugh a lot, but most important, to empower and to fill our cup. Good morning. Great Sunday morning, and welcome to the 25th, 25. The Sister Covenant is 25. Welcome to the 25th podcast of the Sister Covenant in the 10th month. To God be the glory. And we just want to thank you for all your love, support, and all of these powerful conversations and being a part of those conversations. Want to thank you, as always, for supporting us and wearing your Sister Covenant merchandise. And it's not too late. I had someone just the other day stop me at Mayo and say, where do you get a t-shirt like that? You get it from our website at thesistercovenant.com. For every $100 that you spend, $10 will go to UNCF. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. And if you've not joined us in the after conversation, which you know from last week was powerful with the youngins, please do that by joining Facebook and the groups tab. Just click on groups and select the Sister Covenant, and the details are right there on the screen. So it's just that simple. Now, I am bursting at the seams, as you can tell, with this being our 25th podcast. We are walking in boldness, as we always do, but with a little pep in our step. Yes, we are still in the middle of a pandemic, but as my pastor would say, the pandemic does not have me. We have power over this pandemic in this moment because the Sister Covenant is a part of a movement. And we invite all of you, all of our powerful sisters and your men and family members and all those you love. So this is how we're going to seize this moment. Hashtag powerful women get vaccinated. Powerful women get vaccinated. Together we win. We invite you to be a part of our Sister Covenant 25 challenge and enter that hashtag with powerful women get vaccinated. Together we win. And post your why as to why you got vaccinated with your picture. So once again, be a part of the movement and post your picture with your why you became vaccinated, and post with the hashtag powerful women get vaccinated. Together we win. I'm Pat Gillum-Sams, the founder and CEO of the Sister Covenant. Powerful women lead, they don't follow. They use their voice as their truth to empower other women as well as protect and lift their family, friends, and elevate entire communities. These bold, brilliant, brave, and beautiful women are wives, mothers, sisters, and friends, my friends, for 20, 30, 40 plus years, newfound friends. I'm so proud to be a part of this powerful sister circle of women using our collective voice to make a difference. I want to play for you and share with you that powerful conversation we had on last Sunday with the dynamic women, the women in their 20s and their 30s, and the wisdom that they shared with us around the reason they decided to get vaccinated. Want to share that at this time. Thank you so much for joining me in the after conversation. This is where we're just laid back, shoes kicked off. You know, in the pandemic, the only time I really get dressed up is for the Sister Covenant. I have on pumps. I don't have on pantyhose like Jack and Jill days, but I do have on pumps. Okay, so let's talk about the vaccination. I really want to unpack that, ladies. Your age group. Tell me about that. How are those conversations? You guys have made the decision to get vaccinated. But what about your friends? Talk to me about that.
I can start. I think in my circle, everyone is vaccinated. I think, especially coming from public health, we're all about the vaccination, the importance of vaccines. Within like my friend group, I think outside of that, you know, there is a lot of vaccine hesitation, and you know, I think especially in communities of color, the medical community and the government have created an environment where there is distrust, and I put the onus on the government and medical communities because that's where it lies. The historical, you know, incidences of misuse of medical, you know, experiments or research on communities of color have created that. And so, you know, there's a reason, you know, the Latinx community has the highest percentage of unvaccinated folks. Black communities follow that. And so it's really about how do we, you know, kind of intervene in that, like, disinformation that's arising in this era, and how do we create kind of an area of trust where folks feel comfortable going to get vaccinated. I think in my friendship circle, being younger and kind of being in public health and being about like the research and like looking into things, a lot of us do that. And so we feel a bit more comfortable about receiving the vaccine. Also, I think just personally for me, as someone who has like a chronic condition, I have asthma, it was really important for me to get vaccinated because I know that I could be more susceptible to, like, you know, and at a worse, you know, reaction to COVID and being hospitalized. So that's kind of why I got vaccinated.
So Shanita, I know. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joy.
No, sorry. I was just gonna throw in that the time that I spent in New York versus Florida, it was a bit unique because I never thought I'd have the opportunity to kind of have a culture shock coming home, so to speak, because I was in New York when everything first started happening, and New York was very adamant about, keeping things safe, and people were very much staying in the house. Like, you could hear a pin drop in Times Square at the end of March. So it was a bit different. And of course, being back in Florida, my dad being a physician, we were very strict about leaving the house and, being safe and everything. But the rest of Jacksonville didn't really seem to be there yet. So it was kind of interesting. And definitely, my friend group, they're vaccinated, but I've definitely had to have some conversations with people outside of my immediate friend group that maybe aren't as comfortable. And then again, I have to recognize that I was kind of in a quote unquote privileged situation with working in biotech and close to pharmaceuticals. And I kind of had a different understanding of clinical development. And I think that's important. That's important messaging to get out in the Black community.
So I want to hear your take on this, Shanita, being in your space, but I'll share. You guys know I was in Seattle just the last few days, and Miles and he picked the restaurant. He said, "Hey, Mom, I think this is a nice restaurant I want to take you to." We got there and they said, "We need proof of your vaccination record." We didn't have them. I had my card in my wallet since March, but I had just taken it out because it was starting to get just a little frayed. And I said, I got to get this laminated. So we had to scurry, and it's a 3-hour time difference. So we got Mr. Vincent up. It's 11 o'clock Jacksonville time. He's looking for cards in Miles's compartment. Miles is livid. He's like, "We don't need to eat here if they got to do all of that." And I was like, listen, that's the way this is getting ready to happen. So he was able to screenshot us. We were able to get into the restaurant and have a nice meal. But to your point, Joy, that was Seattle. Florida, not so much. Yeah, we've been open for a minute in Florida. Don't get me started about that. Shanita, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. My friendship group is definitely torn. I don't want to say I have more friends who are unvaccinated than are vaccinated, because it's not really something that I'm like just coming out to ask, but I wouldn't be surprised if more of them were unvaccinated than vaccinated. Unfortunately, well, I'm not going to say unfortunately, because I'm still like on the fence. Let me just preface, like, I understand all sides of the conversation. So even within my immediate family, some of us are vaccinated, some of us are not. And I'm someone who got vaccinated later. And in full transparency, I got vaccinated almost because I felt forced to. I work in the school system, just having access to different spaces. You either have to get vaccinated or you have to like go through all of these things. And I think for me, I think, Rachel, you kind of spoke to this. Our generation, one thing I love about our generation is that we ask questions, that we do our own research, that we have conversations. And so I think for a lot of people, it's just like personal choices. Like if you do have pre-existing conditions, or if you are working in different environments where you kind of know how this is all working, you're probably more, prone to get it. But I do understand that people who are just saying, and most people that I know, it's not that they're against the vaccine, they just think it's too soon. And again, I understand like all sides of the conversation. One thing about me, I'm like, well, we all take medicine, right? And none of us really know what's in the medicine. And so that was kind of like
chicken. That's my question to people. Chicken,
what we eat. I mean, really anything that you put in your mouth, we don't really know, what's in it. I'm a woman of faith. So at the end of the day, I'm like, look, if this is how I'm going to go out from this vaccine, then this is just how I'm going to go out. But I put, like I said, and I'm not a big medicine person. So that was kind of like my own thing. And again, I have my own reasons of doing it, but I do understand. And like I said, I want to be fully transparent. I was one of those people who were like, I need to see how this goes like after a year and then I'll do it. But then, like I said, being in different spaces where it's either you get vaccinated or not. And like I said, I kind of just bit the bullet. I will say, however, now that I'm watching the news more, I'm seeing how, with this large population not being unvaccinated, how it's keeping us in this state. My mind definitely is feeling like, okay, I made the best decision because, I want us all to be out of this space. But yeah, I'm definitely one of those people who was hesitant. And like I said, I do know a lot of people who are still unvaccinated and who I don't think will get vaccinated, to be honest.
I think what is concerning to me is a number of things. Obviously, I'm in a different generation, so there are the health issues. For me, like you, Shanita, don't tell your dad, well, he knows with Joy. I don't get the flu shot because I got it once. I got real sick. Got, in my opinion, the flu. Never had the flu before, never had it since. So I'm good. I'm going to take my chances. But this was different. Initially, I was like you, Shanita. It was like, let me see, got to weigh this out. But it was when I had a girlfriend who is a physician, who you guys know, Dr. Kim Barbell Johnson, come on, someone I trusted that said, this isn't new, guys. Yes, COVID-19 is a new variant, but we've had the coronavirus. It's been around for years. We've been working on a vaccine for this. So that put it in perspective that this isn't just some trial, and they don't go in the back and get a white vial and a black vial. And we're going to give this black vial to the black people or the Latina people and the white, you know what I'm saying? It's not that type of thing. So that's one thing. But the other thing is what happened to Miles and I just feel the separation coming wider and wider. It's going to be the people who have and the people that have not. And coming from my background of working in insurance and all of what that looks like, you're going to see the underwriting for it. You're going to see what you don't have access to if you don't. And I grew up in a generation where before you put your kids in school, you got vaccinated or you couldn't have access. So I think those are my concerns, in addition to seeing people I now know get very sick and pass away in some cases. That is my concern. And it seems like your generation is the generation. And I know you, Shanita, is the asking of questions, but I think to Rachel's point, it's the following up of research and not just listening to the internet and social media and all the conspiracy theories.
And I think there's maybe just a general, I don't want this to sound bad, but like our generation, if you don't live with anyone over a certain age, if they just kind of don't necessarily care. It's like, oh, well, I'm not going to get that sick, so what does it matter? And it's like, sometimes you have to just have empathy and realize that you're doing this not just for yourself, but for a greater purpose.
So I just had a relative, 33, to spend 2 weeks in the hospital and was a minute away from a ventilator.
Mm-hmm.
Who felt
it? Miss Pat, to your point and Joy about like requiring the vaccination cards and just, it's about more than yourself. I think, a lot of folks, we think about individual liberties, like the choice to take the vaccine, the choice to wear a mask, the choice to, but when we think about the coronavirus and the impact it's had on our country and our healthcare system, it's beyond the individual at this point. And so we really have to think about how are we taking the right measures for ourselves in order for our communities to be safer and our country to kind of, recover from this, right? Because it's not, just the healthcare system, it's small businesses. It's so it really goes, bigger than ourselves at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Sydney, you're smiling. Thoughts?
No. I would just say, kind of to Joy's point about social media, I feel like a lot of people honestly also just kind of jump on a bandwagon. They hear other people say, oh, they just created the vaccination 12 months ago, and I know somebody who got vaccinated but still got sick. So I think a lot of people just repeat things that they see on Instagram or Twitter without really doing their own research or listening to like scientific facts.
I had a Dr. Cheryl Holder on the podcast 2 weeks ago, and her comment resonated with me. She said, think about that woman in your life, mother, sister, significant other, who's going to have to care for you, because she was targeting that 30-year-olds, those that age that is, good and grown, right? At 30, Shanita, right?
Mhm.
A lot of which have children themselves. So think about that woman in your life that's going to have to care for you if you get sick and your children and put themselves in harm's way because usually they're now a little older, my age and older, with some health issues. That is what we have now. That is what we have now. So it definitely is a crisis. I applaud all you young women for, I know it's not an easy decision and the conversations aren't easy because people are so entrenched, to your point. Who said it? I don't think they're going to get vaccinated. I think what we're going to see is large companies like mine, like some of yours, that mandate
Mhm. Yeah.
because they're going to have to. You mentioned the school system. We see a lot coming down in Florida right now.
In New York now, the restaurants,
Yeah,
football games,
Mhm.
anything.
yeah, Seattle, the restaurants, and they're banding together because it's a public health crisis. Their employees, they can't get service workers. They can't, the people are sick, people are dying. We had a big deal here in Jacksonville, Florida, with a mission here. So people are being affected. So when these companies, it hits their bottom line of revenue
Yeah.
and liability, that's when you're going to see the mandates happen. Just like with smoking. You used to be able to smoke, like the cubicle next to you, the people smoked.
Yeah.
And it became a public crisis. Ladies, once again, we have extended our time. You've been so generous with me and spending this morning with me. Thank you. Any last comments you want to leave with the Sister Covenant? Any nuggets?
I want to say thank you for everything. These kinds of things are going to be, crucial, I feel like, for our community going forward. So it's awesome.
And I just want to say it is so good to see all of you younger ladies on this call. It is just so confirming. I was looking at y'all when you were speaking like you were my little sisters. I was like, yes, Black Girl Magic. We are the epitome of it. So I just hope that you all just continue to do like amazing things. And, especially as Black women, sometimes we feel like we're not being humble when we like share our accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you all continue to like share your accomplishments on your social media with people. Like, people need to see it. So I'm just so proud of you. Even though I don't know you all, I'm very proud of you.
Share your Black girl magic, but continue to support and lift as you climb. That's the epitome, right? That's what we're talking about. And that's what you all are demonstrating. Sydney, I so appreciate you because you postponed a flight to be on the Sister Covenant. So I'm feeling pretty pumped about that.
Of course.
So thank you, ladies. Love you all. Be safe. Okay. Lots of rich conversation. Those young women are powerful, powerful beyond measure. Our future is bright. I am so super pumped and encouraged by young women of that caliber. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing to you another phenomenal and powerful woman who's going to speak with us about a very important topic, sickle cell disease. We all know and we've heard this term probably all of your life, certainly all of mine. But this is Sickle Cell Awareness Month. And I thought it important that we get more educated in our community because we know in the African American community and communities of color, sickle cell disease or sickle cell anemia is something that hits our community hard. So it is my pleasure to introduce to the Sister Covenant, Dr. Lanetta Bronté-Hall. Dr. Bronte-Hall is the president and chief health officer for the Foundation of Sickle Cell Disease Research. Dr. Bronte-Hall, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. So let's go straight at it. Sickle cell disease or sickle cell anemia. I've heard it called both. And as I said in the intro, I've grown up knowing about sickle cell disease. I actually have a girlfriend who has a daughter who has the disease. So I've known about it all for many years, but I still don't feel like I know enough about it. Can you educate us this morning on sickle cell anemia?
Yes. Well, one of my favorite topics is sickle cell disease. And I learned about sickle cell in undergraduate school and then in graduate school. And it's something that has just held hold of me in terms of looking at the inhumanity of how the disease is managed. But sickle cell disease has been around at least for 7,000 plus years. It started in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and the gene in the red blood cell, one of the genes mutated. And it was actually a very good mutation. So typically when there's a mutation of a cell, it will lead to deleterious consequences. So you may get cancer or something like that. But this particular mutation actually led to survival. So I refer to the sickle gene as a survival gene, because without that one cell sickling, that one gene having that mutation, we would have lost a whole population of people. Instead, those people were able to survive malaria, which was devastating the nation there. So because of this sickle gene, people were able to survive malaria and the population itself was able to survive. But when two sickle genes come together, then that's where you have full-blown sickle cell disease. And that disease has many complications and a lot of challenges from birth all the way through adulthood.
So now what you just said makes sense to me. Why this disease is so closely aligned to the Black community. I've never quite understood why that was, but what you're saying now makes sense. So when I got married some few years ago, really 35 years ago, my husband and I both had to be tested for sickle cell trait. Is that how it works? So explain that to us and why that's important.
Right. So we have four proteins that make up our blood. They're called 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains. So it's one of the the sickle gene lives on the beta chains of the hemoglobin, the red blood cell. So we now have these 2 beta chains, and if it's normal hemoglobin, we call it beta A. So it's just hemoglobin A on this beta chain. If there's a mutation on one of the beta chains, then it becomes hemoglobin S, and that's the hemoglobin that sickles or the hemoglobin polymerizes. So if you're a carrier, you just have one of those beta chains that has the S. If you have full-blown disease, then both of your beta chains will have S. But there are some variants, some other variants with sickle cell disease. There's sickle cell SC disease, SD disease. So there are a lot of other mutations that can occur within the hemoglobin, on those hemoglobin chains. But the most common ones are hemoglobin SS, hemoglobin SC, and then hemoglobin AS. A is the normal hemoglobin, S is the sickle hemoglobin, but that's the carrier status, hemoglobin AS.
So Dr. Lanetta, how do we mitigate this? As African Americans, we're global, we're everywhere, all across the world. How do we mitigate this disease spreading, and I say spreading, maybe mutating within our own family circles? What precautions can we take?
So the gene has already mutated. So once you then there's a process through having a child with someone that you can pass this gene from yourself to your baby. But this mutation has sort of already occurred. In terms of mitigating it, that's sort of a challenging question, because we have to ask ourselves, what are we trying to get rid of? So I know individuals, couples who their first baby had sickle cell trait, which meant that they were both, they found out that they were both carriers. The parents were both carriers. And so you then have to decide, well, do I have other children, or, what do I really do? Their first child was a carrier, and they decided to have more children. The second child had sickle cell disease. So mitigating it really becomes more, is something very personal to families. So some families may decide to have a child with sickle cell disease. We have patients who have sickle cell disease and they want to have children. And some of them have children who also have sickle cell disease. What we enforce is education, that people need to be informed. Once you're informed, then you make your decision. So we try not to get into the business of saying, oh, we don't want to ever have any more children born with sickle cell disease, even though we know that the consequences can be grave. It's just really a lifelong process of body breaking down, body healing, a lot of social challenges. But that's not our decision to make. Our role is to really make sure that families understand what their risks are for having a child with sickle cell trait or sickle cell disease. So it really boils down to education and personal choice.
So there is no cure. How does the public, how do we as powerful women, how do we help educate, but also is there an opportunity to work towards a cure of any kind?
Yes, so, sickle cell has been identified in the United States for more than 100 years. And we haven't had a lot of advancements in therapy. Most of the therapies have been palliative. So blood transfusions, IV fluids, heating pads. There's a lot of excitement now because we have 3 new FDA-approved drugs on the market for sickle cell disease. One of them actually de-sickles the red blood cells. So those beta chains that I talked about, it actually de-sickles that hemoglobin cell there. Another one works on a lot of the inflammatory biomarkers within the body, and it helps to decrease inflammation and therefore decreasing pain. And then the other one is sort of like a protein, and it has been found to improve blood flow and also decrease pain episodes and decrease acute chest syndrome. Hydroxyurea is the medication that was approved in 1988, and we have slow uptake of hydroxyurea in the patient community, but we still encourage the use of it because it is standard of care. In terms of a cure, now there have been cures, and we have to define what a cure looks like. Does a cure look like if you have leukemia, for example, you get a bone marrow transplant and then your cells go back to looking like normal cells? The patient is in remission. For sickle cell disease, are we trying to get both of those beta globin chains to be A chains, the normal hemoglobin, which is A, or can we get away with one of those chains being an A chain and the other remaining an S? So that is what the gene therapy and the transplants are looking at now. And there's actually been a lot of success with sickle cell disease and cures. So patients will go from being hemoglobin SS to hemoglobin AS, which is the carrier status. And they report having more energy. Typically with sickle cell trait, you don't have those complications that you have with sickle cell disease. When we look at the percentage of success for transplants and gene therapy and sickle cell disease, it is up to 90%. This is unheard of. When there is a transplant in cancer, you may look at a 50, 60% remission rate. Sickle cell, we're looking at 90% remission rate. If this were any other culture, I am convinced that a 90% remission rate, there would be so much money poured into it. I mean, those statistics are unbelievable. A 90% rate, that's like a cure, basically. So why aren't more patients and families participating in this cure for sickle cell disease? Well, it takes a lot of, there may be conditioning of the body that's involved. So there may be some chemotherapeutic things that need to happen. But although there are now regimens where we don't have to have such stringent preconditioning. But a lot of it is also that on the pediatric side and the transplant side, those physicians aren't on the same page yet for sickle cell disease. Because a child can be born with sickle cell disease and now live into adulthood, may have complications, but with proper care, close monitoring, they can live a pretty, good life. Versus, do you take a risk on a transplant, have a rejection, be on lifelong therapy for rejection, and then just the risk of a transplant where, that patient could die. So do you risk that, or do you say, okay, they have a chronic illness, let's just live with that until there's a more defined cure? But a 90% success rate is actually the highest in any transplant or gene therapy.
Great information, Dr. Lanetta. Great information. What can we do at the Sister Covenant? What can we have a platform here where we reach thousands and thousands of women, and we know that collectively we are powerful. What can we do to advance what you just said? That is phenomenal, 90% success rate. How can we make it 100% or 99%? What can we do to help?
Yes. Well, in order for sickle cell disease to really be successfully managed in the U.S., we have to have a system of care, and that's what's missing. We have a pretty well-defined system for newborn screening. There's universal newborn screening throughout the U.S., meaning that all babies, doesn't matter your race, what your complexion is, nothing, you're going to be screened for sickle cell disease at birth. So we have the newborn screening. The babies are connected to either a pediatrician or pediatric hematologist oncologist. They're started on penicillin prophylaxis early on, about 3 months. They're on this medication twice a day up to the age of 5. And so they go along pretty well with their pediatric care team. Once they hit adolescence and they transition out to adulthood, it literally falls apart. There's no system of care for the adult patients. So what we see now is on the adult side, lots of ER admissions, lots of hospitalizations. And if patients aren't connected to doctors or a system of care, no cure will ever be realized because you can't get enough patients to participate. So if there is really an interest from the women in our community to help sickle cell disease, we have to lift our voice and let our healthcare system know that it is unacceptable for our patients to be treated this way. It's just devastating what I see on the adult side. Frequent blood transfusions, but no chelation of iron that's toxic, and you receive the iron from someone else's blood. We can't get rid of iron, so we have to take a chelating medication to get rid of the iron. Most of the patients aren't on the chelating medications on the adult side just because they're not connected to doctors. So it really is a devastation in the adult world. Now we're seeing more than 50% of patients are dying before the age of 45 years old. This is unacceptable. And it literally is because there is no system of care for these patients outside of pediatrics. And we need to develop that system of care. It can be done. It can be done economically. It can be done when we hire enough medical staff to take care of these patients, but the current system is not working.
Dr. Lanetta,
Thank you for coming on the Sister Covenant. We want to have you back, and perhaps we can do something about elevating this health, the importance of care and the system of care for sickle cell disease. You know, we've not even gotten into the political piece of all of this, but I'm sure that comes into play because politics is in every single thing in our lives. But we want to see how we can be a solution to this health issue. So thank you so much for sharing this information with us today. And we wish you Godspeed in all that you do. Thank you for being there and being on the front line of this disease.
Thank you. And thank you for your important work. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great day.
That was great information from Dr. Bronté-Hall, information that we can all take and we can educate our communities and our families about this disease and how we can be a part of the solution. I have the privilege now to reintroduce to the Sister Covenant a dear, dear friend of mine. You may remember her from June when we did the powerful 2-part series, Morning to Morning, Love Letters from Mom. Selena Webster-Bass. Selena is the founder and CEO of Voices Institute, and also the executive director of the Richard Webster-Bass Health Institute. Selena, good morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Look at you.
It's a pleasure to join you once again.
Once again, you are with us, and we just appreciate you. We appreciate you. Dr. Bronte-Hall came on, as you know, and gave us some great information. And as I said to her, I've heard about sickle cell disease all of my life, and certainly over our last 20 years of friendship, Selena, I've become a lot more familiar, but this morning, the way she broke it down, it really, really made sense to me. And I hope all of our listeners out there, our powerful sister circle, can now help in educating their families and their communities. And certainly, you know, from personal experience, from your life journey as Richard's mom. So share that with us so we can get a more intimate picture of what this disease is like in the journey.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you again for this opportunity. And Dr. Bronte-Hall is a state and national champion for sickle cell. So I am just delighted to share this stage with her, this platform with her. So my journey with sickle cell actually began several years ago. When I say several years ago, in my undergraduate studies. And so I am a biology major. And so my research project was on a treatment for sickle cell at that time called butyrate. And I chose that topic because I knew that I was a carrier of sickle cell disease, and I had sickle cell trait, and I had family members that were actually living with the disease. And so this was a very personal thing for me. And so went on to grad school at University of South Florida, public health program. Also during that time is when I married my life partner, Lester Bass, and we found out that we were with child. And I knew again of my sickle cell trait, but my husband did not know of his sickle cell trait status. And that's partly because he was born before newborn screening had started. And so he was completely unaware. And that's because when you have sickle cell trait, a lot of times there are not any major symptoms with sickle cell trait. There's some studies that show, you may have some blood in the urine. When you're in areas where it's, deoxygenated, you may have some issues, but you lead a very normal life. So if you've not been tested, then you would not know that you are a carrier of sickle cell trait. And so when two parents have sickle cell trait, there is a 25% chance of passing the gene on to your child. And so when we found out we were with child, I had an excellent OBGYN that said, hey, you have sickle cell trait. Let me just test your husband just to be sure. And of course, my husband's like, no, I don't have it. I don't have it. And so, he tested Lester, and indeed he was a carrier of sickle cell trait. And so the 25% risk became real for us. So we proceeded with an amniocentesis, which is a test that's done in utero where cells are taken from the amniotic sac and tested for sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait. And so we learned that our baby boy, our very first child, Richard, would live with sickle cell. And so you can imagine how painful and how devastating that was for us. But we were hopeful, and we were, moving on with the pregnancy. And so we just said we were going to get the best care possible for him. And so the journey began. So Richard was born, and he was the most beautiful baby. All babies are beautiful, but your firstborn baby is really special, right? And so Richard was born, and I just remember how we both cried together. We couldn't believe that we had made something so beautiful together. And Richard had lots of complications. After the third month of life, he started to have what we call pain crises or pain episodes. And it's difficult to hear a baby cry when they're in pain. The wet cry, the hungry cry, the sleepy cry. But this sickle cell cry, the cry that was associated with his pain, was just heart-wrenching, particularly as a mother, because there were times where I could not do much about that pain other than give him a warm bath or, give some, form of pain relief. Or we ended up at the hospital with, IV fluids, because there is no universal cure for sickle cell. So life proceeded on, and Richard was in and out of the hospital. He was in the hospital almost every month of his life. And so it was a painful journey, lots of time with doctors and nurses and hematologists, oncologists, trying to relieve his pain and also trying to minimize the pain episode that he was having. And so in 1999, Richard passed. We thought a normal routine. Okay, we got to go to the hospital. He has fever. Anytime a baby with sickle cell has fever over 101, immediately you have to take them to the hospital. And so that's what we did. And so, but this particular time it was different. And he had a streptococcal infection that was resistant to the antibiotics that he was given. And so he transitioned. And so that was just the most painful experience, the most devastating experience that I think that I've ever experienced for both of us, for both Lester and I. And so it was rough. The grief process was rough. You have all of your questions, all of the whys, why my baby? Why not me instead of the baby? Why isn't there more treatment for sickle cell? Why isn't there more equity? We have all of these treatments for cancer and other diseases. How come is it that sickle cell doesn't have the treatments that are required so that people living with sickle cell have a better quality of life? And so, as I went through the grief journey and process, there were several opportunities that came my way. I had an opportunity to become a hemoglobinopathy counselor, which is an opportunity to tell mothers or tell parents that their child is living with sickle cell. And I really didn't think I had the fortitude to do that. But through my faith in God and through the support from family, from my faith community at Bethel, through the support of my husband, I was able to do that for 7 years, to manage a pediatric sickle cell program as well as serve because for me, it was serve as a hemoglobinopathy counselor and be there for parents and particularly for mothers that were learning of their child's diagnosis. I went on to do work with a national organization with the Be Sickle Smart campaign, where I educated the community. That's actually how I met Dr. Bronté-Hall. I'd done some education down in the Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area. And so we were educating the community and bringing awareness to sickle cell disease through that campaign. And so, again, still dealing with that grief and still making meaning out of that grief. And so I decided that, I want to do more locally in terms of raising awareness. And so we coordinated walkathons. We also sponsored sickle cell conferences and support circles. And so most recently, this past year during the pandemic, we offered virtual support sessions for sickle cell families. And so families would come on and we would have speakers to talk about mental health, to talk about how to manage life, navigate in the healthcare system with COVID-19, as well as living with sickle cell disease. And so earlier this year, I established a nonprofit, Richard Webster-Bass Health Institute, in the name of my son. And so we're very excited that at the end of the month, we are hosting a sickle cell symposium, and we're bringing Dr. Lewis Sue, who is an amazing researcher out of the University of Illinois, as well as two providers right here locally in Jacksonville, Dr. Sheikh from Mayo Clinic and Dr. Ayala from Mayo Clinic as well. And so this is an opportunity for the community to learn more about sickle cell trait, about sickle cell disease, about new advances in terms of medicines, in terms of bone marrow transplants, in terms of gene therapy, which is really our hope for the future in terms of sickle cell disease management. And so we're really excited about that as well.
So Selena, you are the quintessential turn lemons into lemonade. Certainly we talked about the loss of a child, and there's nothing that makes sense about that. But what you've done is you've channeled all of that grief into doing something bigger than yourself, or even bigger than Richard. So when we visited back in June, and we had those opportunities to talk to those beautiful women who also had shared grief of losing a child, a sorority, if you will, that no one really wants to be in. You told us then that you had a project underway, morning to morning, a sister circle, if you will, similar to the Sister Covenant, bringing people together to discuss that grief. Tell us about that, because you're ready to launch that powerful platform now.
Yes, I'm really excited about From Morning to Morning. And this is something actually that's the name came from my journey, actually my spiritual conversion of dealing with the grief process. And so we all know that scripture, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And I was really seeking morning, because there were days when I was smiling on the inside, but I was really broken on the inside. And so my prayer to God was, I want to experience that morning. I want to transform my MOURNING to morning MORNING, and my morning MOURNING to dancing. I wanted life again. I wanted to be happy again. I wanted to be able to smile authentically again. And so I learned that this was not just a unique experience for myself, but many other women who had experienced the loss of a child or of children were experiencing the same things and didn't necessarily have the gracious space or a space of vulnerability, a space where it's non-judgmental, to talk about some of the existential questions that we have from our spiritual perspective, and just dealing with managing life after such loss. Right. So Morning to Morning is part of my dissertation work. I am a divinity student at the Interdenominational Theological Center, Morehouse School of Religion in Atlanta, Georgia. And so this work, yes, is part of my studies, but it's also part of my spiritual journey. And so our first session will be a listening session, and that session is called The Lament. And so it's a space for me to understand, how is it that we define motherhood, and how do we define Black motherhood, and how has the loss of a child transformed your perception and your identity of yourself as a Black mother? And we also want to know, what can the faith community do to be more supportive of mothers who have had children that have transitioned? So that's our first session, really just a listening session to understand the perspectives of various women who've experienced all kinds of loss. You know, a loss can be related to an illness. It could be related to COVID-19. It could be preterm, before you even had a chance to even see the child. So this will really be a diverse group of mothers that have experienced loss, maybe even to community violence, right? So experience loss across a variety of ways. And then our next session is called Midnight, and that's scheduled for September the 19th. And so this is really about just understanding the grief process. And I know for me, we're all kind of familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's model, but there are lots of other models, and some of those models I didn't feel like really fit where I was. Sometimes I felt like I was in several different stages at one time. And so, talking about the numbing that you feel when you initially experienced a loss, talking about the envy maybe that you even have because you have other sisters that have children a similar age, and you're looking and saying, I'm at a birthday party and my baby, I can't, coordinate a birthday party for him because he's no longer here. So really talking about those vulnerable spaces that oftentimes women just sort of, keep secretive and not share aloud. So again, this is gracious space for that. And then the next session is called Daybreak. And so this is where we share about, strategies for managing the grief. I know for me, anniversaries were difficult, or birthdays were difficult. Richard's birthday is October 2nd. And so around that time, there are certain emotions that stir. So how do we manage those emotions? And then finally, we come to mourning, MORNING, right? And so that's just space where we celebrate the memory of our loved ones, where we memorialize our experiences. And so I'm really excited about these sessions, offering the space for African-American women, for Black women to share and to really reach that place of healing and that place of wholeness in terms of their grief process.
Selena, you are truly amazing. You are our angel, because what you've done with this initiative, Morning to Morning, you've capitalized and you have captured what your grief felt like and what it looked like, but now how we can transform that to moving beyond that and truly living a legacy of joy and celebration of life, right? Because that's what we want. We want to celebrate the memories of Richard, and in my case, Lauren. And we talked all about that in June. But we want to celebrate them, and what better way to celebrate them than to give gift of mourning to a group of women that you and I may not even know. So we have that information and we're sharing it right now on the screen. So everybody, and I want to be clear, anybody can join this virtual conversation of these sessions of Morning to Morning, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
So they just need to go on and register and join us in this powerful healing conversation.
Healing and wholeness. Yes.
Healing and wholeness. Selena, thank you so much. Thank you just for being the strong, powerful woman that you are, the woman of God that you are, that we see inside of you. And thank you for being Richard's mom, Trinity's mom, and Spencer's mom.
Yes, and Micah.
And Micah. Why do
Yes.
I forget Micah?
She's the baby, right?
Babies get no respect. I was the baby. Babies just get no respect. But you are an amazing mom and wife. So we thank you, and we will see you again next time on the Sister Covenant. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Pat, so much. Yes.
Amazing. She's amazing woman of God. So register for Morning to Morning.
My name is Dr. Anita Pettaway Tyler, and I am the medical contributor for the awesome Sister Covenant. I am here to tell you that I would like to encourage you to remain vigilant. We all must. COVID-19 is running rampant in our communities, and so we must do something. The something is prevention. The way to prevent COVID-19 is, number one, to get a vaccination. Millions of people have been vaccinated to date, and the vaccine is safe and effective. The other thing that we can do is to make sure that we're masking. We should wear our mask indoors and also outdoors in crowds where the vaccination status is unknown. And lastly, we can make sure that we continue to practice social distancing. We must do this to prevent COVID-19. We can do this, and together we win. Thank you.
We urge, we besiege, we implore you, we beg you today, right now, in this moment, to remain vigilant. These are uncertain times, and we ask you to encourage everyone you care about and love, and even those you don't, to wear their mask, wash their hands, practice good hygiene, remain socially distant, and get the vaccination. Powerful women get vaccinated, and together we win.